Hello everyone and welcome back to Forza Horizon 5, and not the next episode of the Favorite Cars series, because it's just me today. And this is a very different video than one that I've really ever done before, but it's a video that I feel like can help out a decent amount of people when playing Forza Horizon 5, or really any of the Forza games actually. And it's tackling a issue that I've seen quite a few people have. And it's also a topic that's kind of been done to death, especially when the game was first new. A lot of people talked about it, but I feel like some of the information on those videos just isn't really correct anymore, or there's been updates to the information that people haven't really tackled, so I want to go through and give my own take on it. And that topic is how to properly build a vehicle in Forza Horizon 5, or really any Forza game, for specific things. So, things like road races, dirt races, top speed, it's all stuff like that. Drag racing, drifting, that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I am going to pick just really any car, because a lot of the information that I'm going to be talking about, a lot of the points for building specific cars, will work for basically any car. There's a few that it won't work for because it might not have the certain upgrades that you'll need. Like, dedicated off-roaders aren't going to have, at least most of the time, aren't going to have, like, different tire compounds, so you can't really do them for on-road racing, or really much else other than off-roading. So, it won't work for absolutely every vehicle, but so long as your vehicle has the upgrades and tuning options that my example has, then you'll be pretty well fine. And obviously, another thing that I want to talk about is, if you follow this video exactly, your success might be varied, and that just has to do with like general skill level and the way that you drive in the game, because tunes depend on how you drive. How well you're able to use a tune depends on how you drive a vehicle in Forza Horizon 5. Different driving methods will have the same tune act very differently. But it's just a general rule of thumb with really any tune that you download, not just these, to figure out how it drives and adjust your own driving style to allow that tune to do what it needs to do and act how it was built. And I know that's kind of difficult sometimes, but if you just drive around with them for a little bit, you'll kind of figure it out, and it's not going to be all that bad. But enough blabbering from me. We're just going to get started, and we're going to get started with just the most simple thing, which is road racing. Alright, so for my road racing example, I'm not going to do anything too crazy. I'm not going to go like a stupidly grippy car, super powerful. We're just going to take something like this, the 2023 Toyota Camry. Now, you don't have to take this car. I'm just using it as just kind of like a more tame, more normal vehicle. So the first thing that you're going to do is decide, do you want it to be rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive? And that does determine kind of how you're going to build the car. I'm going to do an example of rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive, but only for this, because the other event types that we're going to be covering do have, like, absolutely one is better than the other, whereas road racing, that isn't always the case. So I'm going to do one of each. So we're going to start off with, this thing's actually front wheel drive stock, so we are going to go starting with rear wheel drive. And the second thing that you need to determine is figuring out what class do you want to build in. Now, all my engine swaps are putting me around the middle of A class. So I'm thinking for this, we'll probably start A class. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to keep the stock engine in for now and just see what I can do with keeping in that stock engine. You can also, if you have body kits, check out how that affects you. I don't think I'm going to put on the body kit because it doesn't change my stats enough in a positive way for me to use the PI on that. Something that I definitely am going to do is I'm definitely going to put on both front and rear Forza Aero. And I know Forza Aero is absolutely hideous, but it is incredibly useful. So you're going to have to deal with it, unfortunately. I'm also going to take a look at tire compounds and see how far up those get me. And something I also want to look at here while I'm looking at the tire compounds is I'm actually looking at my horsepower and my weight. And I'm trying to determine, okay, it's taking 17 PI to get me up to sport tires. Now that that PI has been used, will I have enough left to build up my horsepower and reduce my weight? Because those are two of the most important things that you want for a good car. I definitely am not going to be going for slicks because that is way too much PI being used. I think I'll most likely go for semi-slicks because those add a ton of grip. I'm also going to increase the rear tire width because we're rear wheel drive. We don't need to worry about the fronts because all of our power is going to the rear. We'll throw on some wheel spacers here just because it makes the car look a little bit better. It doesn't do anything performance-wise. It's just a nice cosmetic thing that you can do for no PI. And I think in this scenario, I'm going to put on the drift differential. And the reason I'm doing that is because each differential determines how your wheels act when you don't have grip. The drift differential will spin your wheels when you don't have grip, but it gives you the best launch out of all of them, so you're able to, right out of the gate, just launch off the line and hopefully make up some positions immediately. We're going to go race brakes. Brakes are incredibly important. You definitely need them. Suspension isn't as important, but we're going to throw on race suspension, throw on front and rear anti-roll bars, and then this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So we have race weight reduction or sport weight reduction, and this is again where I go and I look at my horsepower and think, will I have enough PI left to boost my horsepower up as far as I need it to? So we're going to throw on race weight reduction for now. Most of the time you can skip the roll cage. In this scenario, though, I think I'll be going for it because it increases my stats a decent bit, and it doesn't actually cost us any PI. So we're going to be going for it. And this is where we go back and we slap on the sport weight reduction. Because if you saw, I can't even get a fully powered turbo without going into S1. And we definitely need that. And we're actually going to be throwing on the anti-lag or anti-lag twin turbos because that actually does increase our stats. Most of the time it doesn't, but as you can see here, our launch stat goes from a 5.1 without anti-lag to a 6.1 with it. So that is definitely something that we want. If you have the PI available, cams are also a really good way to boost your PI. I don't have that PI available, so we're going to be looking at exhaust, engine block, and cooling to get a bulk of our PI. So we're actually going to be going for the engine block here because that adds 10 more horsepower than our exhaust. And now we kind of just see what extra upgrades can we slap on to get more horsepower without going into S2, and it looks like that's going to be it, actually. So we're also going to now look at transmission, and I didn't do transmission when going through the rest of this page's upgrades, because your horsepower actually determines which transmission is going to be the best. So you can do driveline and diff whenever you want, but always skip transmission until the very end. Because if you put in a transmission and then you add horsepower, it might make the transmission you put in less efficient. So we are going to look at this, and the 6-speed appears to be our best bet. So we're going to go with that. Don't worry if you see like your stats turning red. So long as the number doesn't actually go down, then your stats aren't actually getting any worse. So you're good on that part. And this is kind of where a lot of people, at least who aren't used to building cars, get freaked out, which is tuning. They see all of this stuff and the walls of text on the right side, and they get freaked out and they don't want to touch it. But it's not nearly as bad as it seems. The main ones that you need to pay attention to are gearing, springs, and aero. You can absolutely mess with anti-roll bars and tires if you need to, but we're just going to be messing with gearing. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to fix that gear because it's not in the best spot. We're just going to even it out. And a good rule of thumb is if you look down at that graph in the bottom right, I'll enlarge it so you guys can see it. You see the end of our final gear is tucked up in the top right corner. So where the gear connects to your final drive, which is that top line, that top red line, that connection point needs to be tucked like in the corner like that. And as you can see, when we moved it back to touch that corner, we did get extra speed. It was only 0.5 miles an hour, but there are scenarios where that gets you quite a bit of speed. So that's kind of just a general rule of thumb. Unless you're getting super, super precise, that's a pretty good spot to always put the end of your final gear. And we are going to mess with our anti-roll bars. I will typically go for something like 25 in the front, around 35 in the back. We'll go 33 and probably 27, 28 for this. You always want to have your rears more stiff than your fronts, and because that will allow you to turn better. Ride height isn't always super important. It just modifies your top speed and your 0 to 60 a tiny bit. In this case, making the car as tall as possible is actually giving us the best ratio. It reduces our 0 to 60 by a decent little bit and keeps our top speed essentially the same. And then we're going to go over here, and because we're rear wheel drive, I'm going to crank up my rear arrow and my front arrow a tiny little bit. And it's going to reduce our top speed, but it's going to give us the extra turning ability that we're going to want. So this looks pretty good, but obviously these numbers mean absolutely nothing until you actually drive it. So now we're going to come out here and just give it a little test drive, see how it is. And this actually feels really, really good. It is a tiny bit slippy, because we're rear-wheel drive, but it's enough to where I think I'll be able to deal with it. I just gotta be careful as if I feel the rear end start to slip out, I just give it a quick little tap in the other direction to straighten it out and make sure those tires are gripping again. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pull up my telemetry here and show you exactly what I mean. So if you look top right, you'll see steering. So just don't pay attention to the angle because that's not really important. Just watch when it goes left to right as soon as I start slipping going through this corner. You see, as soon as I started slipping, as soon as you heard the screeching, that's when your tires are losing grip. So as soon as I hear that and I feel it in the controller, because my controller starts to vibrate, I just give it a quick little tap in the other direction, and I grip right back up. So that eliminates the risk of me spinning out. And now that we're actually up to speed, our arrow is doing a lot for us. And we're not actually slipping at all, which is wonderful. That's exactly what your arrow should be doing. It should be keeping you as grippy as possible. So this is actually a pretty nice car, but now it's time to actually go and test it out in a race. And we're going to be going over to the Reservorio Sprint. I just call it the Reservoir because that's what it is. And we're just going to go against some AI. Now, AI is not obviously the #1 best thing to determine if a car is good, because you can just lower the difficulty and then the AI is going to be crap. But, I mean, who wants to deal with Forza Horizon 5 online servers? Let's be perfectly honest here. I definitely don't. Alright. We're going to go here. Acceleration, compared to these other guys, is not the absolute greatest. But, I mean, that's to kind of be expected. Rear-wheel drive does have less acceleration than all-wheel drive does, because you're not spreading out your power to all your wheels. But it's got the top speed, and it's a lot better at turning than all-wheel drive is. As you can see, we're able to turn a whole lot better and get the inside on this guy, get the inside on him again. I did give him a little bump, but I didn't, like, spin him out or crash him or anything. And this is where we're really going to shine, getting up here into these tight little corners. Because we're rear-wheel drive, we're going to be able to turn in a whole lot sharper than if we were all-wheel drive. We just have to not overdo it. And I'm not going 100% throttle in these corners. I'm going, for this car specifically, it feels really nice, and I'm not feeling like I'm in danger of spinning out. So I am going like 90%. But most of the time you don't want to go 100% in corners unless you're driving something like the Bad to the Blade, where you're never going to spin out in that. Because if you're going 100% throttle through a turn, as soon as your tires start to slip, because you're turning so sharp, you're going to spin out. And if you don't spin out, you're going to slow down a ton, correcting yourself, and then you're going to lose a whole lot of time. So just take the safe bet, don't go 100% in the corners. If you need to coast them, then absolutely coast them, but do your best not to brake. See, look, I'm not braking for any of these, even when the racing line turns red. I'm just letting off the throttle, and that is enough for me to get through the corner. So brakes are not actually needed in most scenarios. Obviously, that will change per car and per upgrades, but for this specifically, that wasn't needed. And we did actually pretty well. So this car was really well behaved, and it performed really, really well. So I think this was a success. All of these tunes that I'm using will be uploaded to the tune browser, and the share codes will be in the description. So if you want to try out any of these, you are more than welcome. Hey, so editing Jack here, or I guess not editing Jack, future Jack here. I completely forgot to do an all-wheel drive road build, so I didn't figure that out until I was editing the video. So I'm just going to do that right now. I cannot believe that I forgot that. It completely slipped my mind. So yeah, we're just going to do that right now. This is the same car that I did the rear-wheel drive build on. Nothing has been changed. But here's what we're going to do. We are going to reset this back to default, and I'm going to take you through step-by-step of how we're going to do an all-wheel drive build, because it is actually quite different than a rear-wheel drive build. You have to focus a whole lot more on handling than anything. So we are going to slap the all-wheel drive on there, and do we want to swap our engine? No. We are going to once again keep the stock engine, slap the turbos on there, and we're still not going to go with the wide body kit. You can, but I'm not going to. Slap the aero on there. This is super important. You're going to need aero on your all-wheel drive build, because the handling that you have with all-wheel drive is significantly worse. And I think I'm actually going to shell out the extra PI for slick tires here, just because I genuinely think we're going to need it. We're not going to go wide front tires. Slap on the engine spacers there, or wheel spacers, whatever you call them. We're going to go driveline. We're going to go the drift diff here, and that is going to help us out quite a bit. Actually, should we? No. We're going to swap from the drift diff to the race diff, actually, now that I think about it for more than half a second. We're going to put brakes on there, race suspension, anti-roll bars. Those are going to be super, super important, so definitely do that. And once again, we'll go sport weight reduction. And we're just going to try and build as much horsepower as we can. It'll probably end up being about the same, maybe less. Well, looking like less. And then can we get our transmission situation? So the 8-speed and 9-speed do give me better stats, but it makes it a whole lot more clunky to drive, and it already makes it, you're making a heavy car heavier, so I don't think it's necessarily worth it. You can do that, but because we already have all-wheel drive, the extra launch and acceleration isn't something we necessarily need. And can I get lighter rims? Does not look like it, so we are going to call that good on the build itself. We are 3,400 pounds, 460 horsepower, so it's more horsepower than the other build, I believe. I don't know. We'll see. And this is where it gets really, really different. So once again, rule of thumb, just place that right in there. Unless you're this vehicle, in which case you don't actually want that. Alright, but here's what's really important, is your anti-roll bars and your aero are really important for this. So we're going to adjust these to be about like that. Once again, stiffer in the back is very important because that reduces your understeer. And then front aero, we are going to crank up to about there, and then we'll increase rear aero just a tiny bit to make it even 300 because it makes my brain happy. And then we'll call that about good. Obviously, I'm going to test it out a little bit. And you can immediately see the difference between rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. is this thing does not turn nearly as sharp as the rear-wheel drive version. But what it lacks in turning ability, it's going to make up for in acceleration. So you're not going to get through the corners as fast, but you're going to get out of them and accelerate out of them way faster. Whichever drivetrain you go will kind of dictate the rest of the build, because you do need to change quite a bit, at least in the tuning department, to account for these differences. It's like, I went completely different tire compound, we got different horsepower, different weights. So it is going to dictate a lot. But let's see how this thing does. I'm expecting to do pretty well in the first half. I'm not sure how well we're going to do in the second, but we will have to see. And our acceleration is not that great compared to the other guys in here. We are a lot heavier than them, and we're probably also a bit underpowered. But that's not a fault of the tune, that's just a fault of the car doesn't have the best PI management, and it's just stupidly heavy. But as you can see, we're doing pretty great. We also don't need to slow down nearly as fast for these corners, because we have a lot more grip. Our tires aren't going to lock up, and we're not going to slide instead of braking. And this is a much slower time, actually, I believe, at least. 225 could definitely be better. But yeah, that's all-wheel drive for you. You're gonna have more stability and more control, but you're going to have a lot harder time in the corners, and you're most likely also going to have a lower top speed because you're all-wheel drive and you're about 200 pounds heavier, depending on the vehicle. So rear-wheel drive cars can run from you in the straights and can, in the low-speed corners at least, are going to dominate. So all-wheel drive is good, and you can tune out a lot of the understeer. It's really, really, really good on certain tracks or certain cars, or even just like off-road. Is all-wheel drive is completely dominant. So it's not useless, but it just depends on the car. For certain cars, it's not that great. Like for this one, it's not that great. But for other cars, it's a must. So just be a little bit, like, don't say that, no, just choose your drivetrain carefully, is what I'm trying to say. Alright, and then moving on to dirt racing. There's kind of two ways that you can do dirt racing. You can make a really, really light car that is pretty slow, but really good in the corners. Something like the Sierra 700R or the Peel Trident is a really good example of that. Or you can do something like the Bone Shaker, which is really, really fast and accelerates like crazy, but isn't as good in the corners. It's still good, but not as good. And what we're going to be going with is this, the Audi Sport Quattro S1. I already have a tune built for this thing, and I believe it is shared. Let me see. Yes, it is. So this tune is the exact tune that I'm using, but I will go in here and show you what it is. So first of all, we did engine swap. We went to the 5.2 liter V10, because that gives us the best ratio of horsepower and torque. And torque is really, really important for dirt because that's going to give you the best launch. And launching on dirt is really important because if you're just spinning your wheels, then you're not going to move because the surface is so loose. So having a whole lot of torque is important for something like that. We're obviously all-wheel drive. All-wheel drive is 100% better on dirt. And then we have the extra twin turbos just to give us more horsepower. And then I went with this because it's adjustable front arrow, so I was able to change that. Same with the rear wing. And then here's where a lot of people I feel go wrong, is they do things like rally tires, but off-road race tires are 100% the best tire compound for dirt. No discussion. They are unbelievably stupidly grippy, and they also drop your PI like crazy. Like, if I go to rally tires, I'm in S2 class. It's 914. Meanwhile, off-road race tires, it says that these give you more grip, but they don't. The game is not being truthful. These are way grippier. Some people go snow tires, and I don't understand those people. I used to do semi-slicks, which aren't terrible, but compared to off-road race tires, they are not what you want to go with. You can also go with slicks, but that's a whole lot more PI, and it's not really worth it in my opinion. I mean, if you're doing like rally racing in a higher class, so it's dirt and road, you can do slicks if you have the PI for it, but I would say off-road race is the best, and never touch drag tires ever. We actually have... I don't always do this, but I had to do it in this case for PI reasons. We have skinny front tires and super wide rear tires. You always want the widest rear tires you can get, because that gives you tremendous amounts of grip. We went with the lightest rims that you can get. Those aren't stupidly important, but it's nice just to make yourself as light as possible. Transmission, we have the 4-speed because that gives us the best stats. It does hurt our launch a bit, but it's fine. Off-road diff, obviously. We got race brakes. We have... This thing is on rally suspension stock. So... Or race suspension. I don't quite remember which it has. I believe it's rally suspension. It's rally car. I hope it is. But rally suspension actually does a lot more than you think it would. So slap that on. It's usually just one extra PI. And then we just put on as much horsepower as we could. I can definitely get a lot more out of this engine, but with the PI that we were working with, I wasn't able to. But this is still a really good vehicle. Once again, we did the thing with our gearing. We put it right into the top right corner of the graph. Our anti-roll bars are actually quite soft. I don't think I messed with those at all. Our ride height is as low as possible because that gives us the best acceleration and top speed for this exact car. And our aero is quite extreme just to make sure that we really stick to the road and we're not going to hit a bump and go flying into Narnia. And I quite enjoy driving this car. This is probably my favorite off-road vehicle to drive, just because it's so much fun. It's really grippy. It does have some slide to it on dirt, but every car does. And it actually has the kind of slide that you want in an off-road vehicle because dirt is so loose and a lot harder to grip than pavement. You actually do want your car to slide a bit so you can keep a lot of your momentum going into turns and you don't need to brake as much. So having a car with just a little bit of slide like this one does is actually quite beneficial. You just got to make sure not to overdo it and end up sliding into a wall or spinning out. And that can be kind of a delicate balance, but a general rule of thumb is just increase your downforce until it feels nice to drive. Just make sure your top speed doesn't suffer too much because of it. Obviously, on some tracks, you're not going to need a super high top speed. But if you aren't making multiple different cars for each thing to handle different tracks, then you need a nice balance if you're just going to use the one car. But let's get right into this dirt race here, and let's see how we perform. So immediately, we're all-wheel drive, so is most of the vehicles in this, and we launch like a rocket. And there you can see my sliding actually came in handy there, allowed me to get a couple positions, and I've landed on a Ford. Sorry, Ken. We're going to move over here just so we don't land on Ken's head again. Assuming that actually is Ken, I don't remember. Little dab of the handbrake just to turn in extra sharp. I know I'm not going to spin out because of all my downforce and my super grippy tires. Take the bottom here on these corners to get the inside and get around the chassis. And you actually want to go the left onto that corner to avoid the water and save some time. It saves a lot more time than you think it does. So there's a little tip for getting faster on this specific track. Once again, no brakes, maybe a tiny dab of the brake and the handbrake just to get in position to turn. Once again, sliding around this whole corner so I can keep my speed up and accelerating all the way through here. Tiny dab of the handbrake just to turn in extra sharp, avoid the tires, and that's lap 1 down. This thing feels absolutely amazing. It is a complete dream to drive. So I highly recommend that you guys either try out this car in general or try my specific tune. Once again, it is uploaded and the share code will be in the description, so you guys can check that out. But this thing is absolutely amazing. It's so grippy, and it's got just that tiny bit of slide that you want out of a car like this. Got a not great bounce coming out of the wall there onto that turn, so I did have to counter steer and adjust because of that. Tiny dab of the brake just to turn us a little bit. Tiny dab of the brake to turn us a little bit again. And something I do want to say is when I say tiny dab of the brake, I am pressing down the brake maybe 25% for a split second. Couple dabs of the handbrake there. Like, I'm holding it, I'm not holding it down. That is, I've never had that happen to me before. So I'm not holding these buttons down, like the brake or the handbrake, really at all. I'm basically just, so like, when you're typing a sentence on like a keyboard, I'm holding down the A button for my handbrake or the left trigger for my brake about as much time as you would to press a key on a keyboard. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, like those 2 dabs of the handbrake were a tiny bit longer there, but most of the time it's just barely pressing it down. And I'm not even applying, when I'm doing the brake itself, I'm applying almost no pressure to it. Like, for those tiny little dabs, I don't even know if it registered those dabs, but it was like maybe 10%. I'm never going above 25%. For this track in this car specifically, I'm never going above 25 because it doesn't need it. It's so grippy and so fluid that it doesn't need harsh braking. But look at that, 106 lap time. This thing is absolutely nuts. It is so much fun. I absolutely love it. So I highly, highly recommend you guys try this thing out if you are able. So much fun. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to be getting into here is not a event type, but it's something that a decent amount of people will do, and it's top speed. Now, you could lump this in with drag racing, but I'm not going to, because there's a couple distinct differences between the event types that warrant going over separately. So, it doesn't really matter what car you pick for top speed, so I think we are just going to grab, what should I do? You know what? Let's do this. We'll do this. Big, heavy Bentley. So first thing you do for top speed, it's quite literally as simple as max horsepower, little weight. If you're really try-harding it, you want to go as light as possible, which does mean rear-wheel drive. Even if your car is all-wheel drive stock, rear-wheel drive is important because, simply put, 5,011 pounds to 4,857 pounds. It removes 150 pounds. So that's going to be really, really great. Avoid aero at all costs because our speed stat goes from an 8.6 to a 7.7 and then from an 8.6 to a 7.9. So you don't want to touch aero. We're even going to go a step further and remove the stock rear wing because that saves us weight and it removes aero. Tire compound doesn't typically matter. You just want something really grippy so that when you're going super, super fast, you don't spin out. I will go with slicks. And whether or not you increase your tire size is up to you. If you're going stupidly try hard, then I wouldn't. Because that, once again, adds extra weight. You go for lightweight rims. This doesn't change anything. It doesn't change your weight at all. So we're going to go with that. And if anything, it makes your car more stable because it's slightly wider. Once again, we skip transmission, grab this stuff. This doesn't really matter. I just go with drift diff to get the best launch that I possibly can. Go with race suspension because that does actually decrease your weight. Anti-roll bars also decrease your weight. And then you want weight reduction. That removes over 1,000 pounds from this car. Man, Bentleys are heavy. Stay away from the roll cage. It adds 150 pounds. And again, light as possible is the goal. And then just crank up that horsepower as high as you possibly can. Speed traps don't have PI limits. And then we go back to transmission here. We grab the 4-speed. And this is actually best case scenario because the 4-speed is the lightest of the transmissions because it has the least amount of gears. But the drift transmission isn't always the best one for your car because it can murder your stats. So we actually got really lucky that it gave us the best stats. And then gearing, just once again, slap that right about here. And with top speed specifically, we're going to go a little bit in either direction to see if that increases our top speed at all. Does that? No. Okay, so 273.4 is about where this is going to be, so we're just going to slap it in the corner there. No, this speed isn't always accurate, so you want to check that. You want to just ignore that top speed thing because it's not always accurate, especially because of things like going up or down hills. Now we're actually going to mess with our ride height here because it can actually make a difference. In this case, it does not. So I'm just going to put it as low to the ground as possible because why not? Arrow, if you cannot remove your arrow, then slam that all the way to speed, but I removed at least the rear wing. Can't do anything about this, though. And putting on front arrow just to adjust this would actually make our car worse, because it would be heavier, and you probably wouldn't be able to get it down as much as just not having it there. So this looks pretty good. So we are going to take this car over to the highway because that is the biggest quote-unquote straight line that you can get in the game. So we are going to fast travel over here, and we're just going to see what it can do. The launch is going to be sketchy because we're rear-wheel drive with so much horsepower. Like, just all the wheels spin. I let off the gas there a bit just to get grip, and then I'm kind of babying it a little bit just so I can shift up through the gears and get to a spot where I'm not wheel spinning. There we go, and now we go 100% throttle. And then you just try not to die on your way down the highway. Easier said than done. Let's see what happens. Oh, see, there it tried to kill me. Yep, see, this is the downside of rear-wheel drive, is it's a lot more rowdy. And it's a lot less well-behaved. So you do gotta be paying attention, you have to be on it, so that you don't spin out and crash. But we're actually flying right now. 275 miles an hour. And again, this car weighs like 3,700 pounds. So that is incredibly impressive. Good job, big old Bentley. But that's kind of how you do top speed. And I see so many people building top speed cars, and they still have roll cages in, and they still have aero on, and I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? That makes you so much worse. And like, even if you have your aero cranked all the way to speed, then it doesn't matter, because that's still extra weight, and if you shed that, you're going to go faster. So that is kind of how you do that, and now we are going to move on to drag racing. And drag racing is pretty simple, but I'm still going to go over it because there's a couple things that are different enough to top speed to where it's worth going over. Alright, and for our drag vehicle, what should we go? You know, I see Mercury, and it's a big old muscle car. We'll go with this guy. So, drag racing is probably the most simple. Just pack in as much horsepower as you can. Go all-wheel drive, always, because unless you're the pro stock. If you're the pro stock, it's actually better rear-wheel drive. I'm not quite sure why that is, but it is. It just gives you the most grip and the best launch off the line, which in drag racing could make or break your car. You go no aero, because that's extra weight. And then hoods, for some reason, hoods make your car lighter, despite you now having an engine that sticks out the hood of your car. You're somehow 7 pounds lighter. I don't understand how that works. And then this car wasn't actually built as a drag car. So we're going to slap drag tires on there. Super wide front tires, skinny front tires. Your front tires aren't going to contribute as much in the grip department as your rear tires, so you are able to keep them skinny and still do just as good. Obviously, you want your lighter rims on there, which I've already got. We're not going to mess with transmission. We do that. And then this is where drift diff is the most important, because it gives you the best launch, and like I said, a good launch could make or break your car. And then we are going to go in here. I built this thing as a drift car. It wasn't that great. So we're going to take the drift suspension off, put on the race suspension, weight reduction, no roll cage, just making sure that we have all the race stuff, which makes you lighter. And we don't have engine upgrades because of the engine that I slapped in here. But if you are using a different car that doesn't have this engine, then you're most likely going to have engine upgrades. So just slap all of those on there. And then we are going to do one last check for our transmission, and this is the best transmission, so we are good. We are a tiny bit heavier is okay. That's just because drift suspension might be lighter than race suspension. I could be wrong. And now this is why I say that there's a difference between top speed and drag racing. Because in drag racing, you don't always want the highest top speed unless you're going for the mile drag strip in the jungle. But if you're doing the festival or the temple drag strip, then acceleration and 0 to 60 time is what you want. So we are going to move this over, and we have a much worse 0 to 60 time. So we're actually going to go the other direction a bit, and that is actually better. So it looks like 1.223 is probably the fastest 0 to 60 we're going to get. So now we work our way backwards, and we get the highest top speed that we can while keeping that 0 to 60. It looks like that's going to be 214. You can mess with the individual gears. Let's just see real quick if that improves things. And it doesn't look like first gear is going to improve anything. I will improve the final gear a bit. That's not going to mess with our 0 to 60 because we're going to be going well over 60 miles an hour by the time we hit it. But it is going to give us a faster top speeds to make sure that we don't top out before we reach the line. But this is actually looking pretty good. I did forget to go in and actually mess with springs. And springs are important in drag racing because they do mess with your 0 to 60 and your top speed. So we're just going to check real quick if any of this improves our top speed. Ah, there we go. So it does improve our 0 to 60. It brings it down a decent bit if we bring the front all the way down. And then I can check aero, but you can't mess with it, so it's not really worth it. Tire pressure is something you can mess with. I don't think we're going to need to. If you get some wheel spin off the line, then you can. But as you can see with this car, like, we are getting some, but it's not actually affecting us. I don't think we'd be able to tune that out to get none, so we're just going to leave the tire pressure as it is. And we're just going to try this thing out in a drag race. Alright, we launch, and look at that. Immediately, we are at the front of the pack. Like, it wasn't even close. And we are not going to reach our top speed. We get pretty close, but it looks like I made my gears just about perfect. So that is wonderful. 14.3. It's not going to get you any leaderboard spots, but it's still pretty good. Alright, but that's drag racing, and now on to drifting. Now, for drifting, I'm actually going to use a drift car that I really, really enjoy. Like, I made it for a video, and I've just been continuing to use it. It is so much fun. It's pretty beginner-friendly. It is also uploaded. I will, again, put the share codes to... I'm not going to put the drag racing share code in there because it's not actually a good drag car. But I will absolutely put the rest of these in there. Alright, so drifting in this game is very similar to drag racing. Really, the only difference that you need is drift suspension, as well as instead of going thick tires, you go skinnies in the front, skinnies in the back. And there is a big difference between rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive drifting. However, all-wheel drive, for the longest time, has been considered a lot better than rear-wheel drive. Front-wheel drive is probably the best out of the three, but front-wheel drive is very limited in the cars that you can choose, and also a lot harder. So I'm not going to be going over that. If you want me to make a dedicated front-wheel drive drifting thing, I can do that. But for now, we're just going to be talking about this. Alright, so you want tons of horsepower, all-wheel drive, and here's the thing that kind of seems weird is you want drag tires if you're drifting all-wheel drive, because drag tires, they allow you to keep your speed up really, really well, and they also are really, really slippy when you're drifting, but they're not, like, uncontrollable. You go from sliding to, if you need to, you can grip really fast with these tires. So if you're trying to spin out, you can get grip back really, really well. And that gives you a massive amount of control. Transmission is going to be just the best transmission you can get. Light as possible. I slapped a roll cage in here. You don't have to do that. It will have a slight effect on your vehicle, but you absolutely do not have to do that. It's not super important. Also, I'm just going to point out, it pisses me off that this thing has rear wheel spacers and not front ones, because this looks ridiculous. Tuning, once again, gearing just in the corner. This matters a whole lot less. You just want to make sure that you have decently long gears so that you're not drifting at 30 miles an hour. Tire pressure can matter. Ride height doesn't really matter. Go the drift differential. I forgot to show that while I was in the garage. But, like, as you can see, I touched the handbrake to get a slide started, and it's... like, it's pretty nice. And we are going to go... and let's do... which drift zone do we want to do? Let's go over and let's do this one, actually. Camino de Montana. Try out this one. Most important thing, just keep your speed up. And see what I mean with the control is I can even go backwards in this drift zone and keep going because this thing just suddenly grips up so well. It gives me a monumental amount of control in the zone, so I can make any adjustments that I need to whenever I need to. And just like that, first attempt, 171, that's not close to my personal best. Like I said, this thing isn't OP in any means. It's just really, really beginner-friendly. It's super, super nice to drive. It's very, very floaty. Goes through the corners. Fuck you, Mitsubishi. And look at that. We were pointing backwards for a little bit of that zone. And just... it's so controllable. Ooh. Holding the handbrake there just to keep the drift going. Hold the handbrake here just to keep the drift going. And that's 186 second attempt. This is such a nice drift car to drive. I absolutely love this thing. Like, it's so fluid, it's so floaty. It's not snappy, which you would want a snappy car in order to maximize points, but that's really, really difficult to drive. If you make a mistake, you are going to fly off the road. Editor me will put in footage of me driving the Formula Drift Viper in Horizon 4 just to show you what a stupidly snappy car looks like. It is terrifying. But this is super, super beginner friendly, and it's not terrible on points either. And you can do this with pretty much any car. Short wheelbase cars are better for points, long wheelbase cars are better for control. And this is a super long wheelbase car. For those of you who aren't sure what I mean when I say long or short wheelbase. It is the distance between your front and rear wheels. The shorter that distance, the faster you're going to be able to snap from one side to the other, so pointing one way in a drift zone to pointing the other way in a drift zone. But the longer the wheelbase, the easier it is to control, because you're not snapping nearly as fast. You have more time to make tiny adjustments with a long wheelbase car. So they're more beginner friendly. But this thing is absolutely awesome. I love this car. And I should also mention, I'm not going over the difference between cross-country and dirt, because they're essentially the same. Like, I wouldn't build a rally car or a dirt car different than a cross-country car. I wouldn't. There's no use in doing that. Also, same for street racing versus road racing. I would not build those cars any differently. So this has been your guide to building a car for every major event type in Forza Horizon 5. Once again, this might not work for everybody, because everybody drives differently. So, like, certain builds, like, especially for drifting, this build very much will not work for everybody, because drifting is one of those things where everybody does it differently. So, if this car doesn't fit the way that you drift and your drifting style, it's not going to be nearly as effective. But that's why, as a Forza player and someone who's trying out other people's tunes, it's really important to change the way that you drive depending on the tune. Because you're never going to get a tune that someone else made to conform to the way that you drive. It is up to you to conform the way that you drive to the way that the tune is meant to be driven, so that you can get as much out of the tune as possible. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for today. If you enjoyed or found this helpful, please like, subscribe, share the video, do all the things YouTubers tell you to do. Also, make sure to check out our non-tutorial content. We do Forza Horizon 5 challenges every single Saturday. And we also do other games. We do things like modded Minecraft, which has made its return. So, after like a 3 to 4 month hiatus, it's finally back. So, we would appreciate it if you gave that some support as well. Also, we are going to be covering Horizon 6 the day it releases. I pre-ordered it, so I am going to... Suki also pre-ordered it, so we are going to be covering that the day it comes out. So if you are excited for that, definitely subscribe so you can see that. But anyways, that's going to be it for today. Thank you all very much for watching, and we're going to see you guys next time.